He's tearing her apart!
The scream shattered the calm of the quiet suburban street in Stamford, Connecticut. Inside the beige two-story home, chaos exploded. Heavy furniture crashed against the hardwood floor. Glass shattered. A deep, guttural roar filled the air. Raw, primal, not human. Seconds later, a woman's desperate cry cut through the noise, but it was already too late. In the kitchen, a woman lay bloodied and barely conscious, her hands shredded, her face unrecognizable, her lips torn off, her nose gone, her eyes swollen shut under blood and trauma. Beside her stood a 200-pound chimpanzee, his tan fur soaked in red, panting heavily, his fists clenched in rage. He wasn't a wild animal from a jungle safari. His name was Travis, and until that very moment, he was treated like a son. Before we go any further, if stories like this shock you, move you, or make you think twice about the animals we invite into our lives, hit that subscribe button. This is Animal Story. True tales of love, loyalty, and sometimes tragedy between humans and the creatures they thought they knew best. New stories every week. Don't miss what's coming next. Sandra Harold had no time to think. She just stood there, frozen in horror as her beloved chimpanzee, the one she raised like family, ripped her best friend to pieces. Travis was no longer the playful companion she cuddled with on the couch. He was a weapon of muscle and rage. Charla Nash, 55 years old, had only stopped by to help. Travis had gotten out of the house and wouldn't come back in. Sandra thought. Charla's familiar voice might calm him. Instead, the moment Charla stepped out of her car and handed Travis his favorite toy, a Tickle Me Elmo doll, the chimpanzee lunged. He didn't growl. He didn't hesitate. He attacked. Sandra tried everything, screaming, hitting him with a shovel, stabbing him with a kitchen knife. Nothing worked. Travis wasn't there anymore. What had taken over was something ancient and untamed. A force stronger than love, stronger than memory, stronger than reason, and as Charla's blood pooled onto the floor and soaked into the rug Travis had once curled up on while watching cartoons, Sandra ran to the phone and called 911. Her voice on the recording still chills anyone who hears it. "Send the police! He's eating her! Oh, God! He's killing my friend!" When the first officer arrived, Travis didn't cower or run. He opened the front door like a person, walked out with blood covering his mouth and chest, and charged straight. At the cruiser, the officer fired multiple times before the chimpanzee dropped dead on the driveway, inches from the driver's side. Neighbors gathered behind yellow police tape. Some were crying. Others stood in disbelief. No one could understand what had just happened. This wasn't just an attack. It was the collapse of a bond no one thought could break. The end of a love story between a woman and an animal she raised from infancy, bathed, dressed, and called her child. But to understand what truly happened that day, we need to go back. Back to when it all began. To when a lonely woman believed that love could tame the wild. To when Travis the chimp was just a baby in diapers, and Sandra believed he was her second chance at family. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first mistake. To really understand what happened that February afternoon in 2009, you have to first understand Sandra Harold. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't reckless. She was lonely. Sandra had lived a life full of heartbreak. She ran a towing company in Stamford, Connecticut. Gritty work, mostly thankless. Her husband, Jerome, helped run the business until he passed away suddenly from cancer. Then, just a few years later, the unthinkable happened. Her only child, her daughter, died in a car accident. After that, the house got quiet. Too quiet. No footsteps on the stairs. No dinner table laughter. No reason to put 2 cups of coffee on in the morning. Sandra was left with nothing but empty rooms and the crushing silence of grief. That's when Travis came into her life. He was just a baby then, barely 3 days old, an orphaned chimpanzee whose mother had been killed at a Missouri sanctuary. Sandra and her husband had always been fascinated with exotic animals, and when the opportunity came to adopt the infant Chimp, they said yes without hesitation. They named him Travis, after a singer her husband liked. And from the very beginning, Sandra didn't see him as a pet. She saw him as a son. She bottle-fed him in the middle of the night. She sang lullabies while rocking him to sleep. She dressed him in Oshkosh overalls and toddler shoes. When he got a little older, she taught him to brush his teeth, open the fridge, even microwave his favorite frozen meals. Travis sat at the dinner table like anyone else. He used a fork. He watched TV. He had his own bedroom with a little bed and SpongeBob bedsheets. Sandra called him my boy. She signed birthday cards. Love, Mom. Neighbors who visited the house were equal parts amazed and charmed. He's just like a little person, one woman later recalled. I swear he'd smile when you talk to him. Sandra never remarried, never adopted again. In her mind, and in her heart, Travis was enough. He filled the hole left behind by tragedy. He gave her purpose. When she walked him through town, wearing a baseball cap and jeans, people would wave. Local news did fluff pieces on them. Travis even starred in a few TV commercials. He was a celebrity. And Sandra, she was proud. But maybe, just maybe, she also forgot something. Forgot that no matter how many Scooby-Doo DVDs he watched, no matter how well he could use the remote or sip tea from a mug, Travis was still a wild animal. Sandra didn't see that, or didn't want to. To her, Travis wasn't just a chimpanzee. He was her last connection to motherhood, to joy, to being needed. She'd already buried a husband and a daughter. She wasn't about to give up the one soul who made her feel whole again. And it wasn't just Sandra who believed in Travis. Friends, neighbors, even strangers online adored the bond they had. There were videos of Travis painting with a brush, riding in the front seat of a red convertible with sunglasses on, hugging Sandra like a child hugging his mom after school. He was funny. He was sweet. He seemed safe. But beneath all of that warmth was something nobody talked about. Travis was growing. He wasn't a baby anymore. He was a full-grown adult male chimpanzee, nearly 200 pounds of raw muscle with the strength to rip a car door off its hinges. In the wild, chimps that size would be leading troops, fighting rivals, asserting dominance. In Sandra's home, there was no jungle, no rivals, just love. But love, as we'll soon learn, has limits, especially when it comes face to face with instinct. In Sandra's world, Travis wasn't a chimpanzee, he was her boy. Every morning, they had the same routine. Travis would shuffle into the kitchen, still rubbing his eyes, and Sandra would already have his breakfast waiting. Eggs, toast, and a cup of herbal tea. He'd sit at the table, grip the spoon with his long fingers, and eat like any teenager getting ready for the day. Then came his favorite activity, brushing his teeth. Travis had his own toothbrush, his own sink, even a little stool he'd stand on. He loved to grin at himself in the mirror, baring his massive teeth and mimicking Sandra's expressions. Sometimes, he'd steal her makeup brush just to make her laugh. They had their TV shows. Travis was a big fan of Lilo and Stitch and The Price is Right. He even learned how to change channels with the remote. Sandra said he was smarter than most. People she knew. In the afternoons, they'd drive around town in her red car. Travis always rode in the front seat, buckled up, sunglasses on, waving at pedestrians like a celebrity. He loved attention, and the town loved him right back. "There's Travis," kids would shout as they passed the car. "Look, The monkey's wearing a t-shirt. He wasn't just loved, he was famous. Sandra had trained him to understand commands, follow house rules, even paint with a brush. Local. News stations ran stories about the domesticated chimp who acts like a human. Tourists once stopped Sandra at a gas station just to take a picture with Travis. Online, videos of him pouring himself juice or flipping through picture books went viral. To outsiders, it looked magical, heartwarming, the perfect example of what love and patience could accomplish, even with a wild animal. But love has blind spots. And this bond, as deep and beautiful as it seemed, was already showing tiny cracks. There were moments here and there when Sandra noticed small shifts. Travis had started getting frustrated more easily. If the internet went out, or if Sandra said no to a treat, he'd throw things. Not little tantrums, but real, dangerous outbursts. One time, he tore the door off a kitchen cabinet because he couldn't get to the cookies inside. Another time, he bit a family friend, not badly, but enough to raise concern. Still, Sandra downplayed it. He was just scared, she'd said. He didn't mean it. And yet, as Travis got older, his body grew stronger. His shoulders broadened, his jaw thickened. He could easily lift furniture, open locked doors, climb to the roof in seconds. He wasn't a baby anymore. He was a 200-pound alpha male. Chimpanzees in the wild, at that age, are territorial. They test boundaries. They challenge dominance. But in Sandra's home, there were no other chimps, just her. And she never thought for a second that he would hurt her. Because to her, Travis wasn't just strong. He was sweet, loving, playful, every night. They'd lie on the couch, him curled up like a toddler, Sandra rubbing his back until he fell asleep. She once said, "When I look at him, I see my family again. I see my child." But some neighbors had started to worry. You could see it in the way they stepped back a little when Travis came out. There was a quiet unease. One even called animal control once, but nothing came of it. After all, Sandra had permits. Travis was well-behaved. And every time someone raised concerns, she had the same response. "He would never hurt me. I raised him. He loves me." And that may have been true. But what Sandra didn't fully understand, what few people do, is that love doesn't erase instinct. No matter how well trained, no matter how emotionally bonded, Travis was still a chimpanzee. And chimpanzees, especially adult males, are capable of sudden, uncontrollable aggression. Looking back, the signs were all there. But in the moment, to Sandra, everything still felt normal, safe, loving. For years, Sandra Harold believed she had done the impossible. She'd raised a wild animal inside her home, loved him like a son, and never had a serious incident. No attacks, no violence, no danger. At least that's what she told herself. But behind the photos, behind the viral videos of Travis sipping tea and painting with watercolors, things were starting to change. Subtly at first, then not so subtly. Travis was almost 15 years old by 2009, the equivalent of a fully grown adult male chimpanzee. In the wild, chimps at this age are unpredictable, aggressive, and always looking to assert dominance. They don't play nice, they don't share, they fight, they take. And in Sandra's house, Travis was growing stronger and moodier by the day. There were warning signs, clear ones. He started slamming doors when frustrated. He ripped apart cabinets. He'd grab objects, plates, glass vases, remote controls, and launch them across the room when something didn't go his way. Neighbors began to worry. Loud thumps and strange howls came from Sandra's house. One neighbor even told local reporters, "We were afraid to say anything. It's not like you want to start a fight with someone who treats a 200-pound chimp like a child. But some people did speak up. An animal control officer had once stopped by after a minor complaint. He was shocked to see Travis, fully grown, pacing the room wearing a t-shirt and jeans. The officer suggested Sandra consider relocating him to a sanctuary. She refused. "He's not a wild animal," she said. "He's family." Even experts weighed in. Primatologists, people who study chimps for a living, warned that keeping one in a domestic setting was a ticking time bomb. They said chimps, no matter how sweet they seem, are too strong, too instinctual, too dangerous once they mature. But Sandra wouldn't hear it. She was polite, but firm. "I raised him. I know him better than anyone. He wouldn't hurt me, not Travis." And it wasn't just professionals raising concerns. Even friends who had known Sandra for years started to pull away. One friend recalled a chilling moment during a visit. Travis had become agitated over something small. Sandra turned off the TV, or the cookies weren't where he expected, and he let out a loud scream, baring his teeth, fists clenched. "You could feel the air change," the friend said. It was like suddenly, we weren't in control anymore. She never came back to the house after that. Still, Sandra stayed in denial. She saw those outbursts as growing pains, just little tantrums. Travis wasn't dangerous, she said. He was emotional, sensitive, a little spoiled maybe, but not a threat. Besides, she had invested her whole life into him. Her grief, her love, her identity, all of it was tied to that chimp. Admitting he might be dangerous would mean admitting she had made a mistake. That maybe she'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. And then there was the medication. Travis had been prescribed Xanax, the anti-anxiety drug, by a veterinarian. Sandra would sometimes mix it into his tea or food when he seemed worked up. It was her way of helping him relax, she'd say, but no one really knew how the drug affected him. Chimps aren't supposed to be on human medication. Some reports later speculated that Xanax may have worsened Travis's paranoia or aggression, but the truth is, we'll never really know. What we do know is that people tried to warn her. They told her he was too big, too powerful. They told her to consider rehoming him, to put safety first. But Sandra's heart was already all in. There was no changing her mind. "I know him," she told everyone. "He would never hurt me." But it wasn't her he would hurt. It was supposed to be a normal Monday, February 16th, 2009. Cold and gray in Stamford, Connecticut. Sandra Harold was at home with Travis, just the two of them like always. She was sipping her coffee, flipping through the newspaper. Travis was restless. He'd managed to slip outside earlier that morning, and now he wasn't settling down. Something about the weather or the mood. He was pacing, agitated. Sandra thought a familiar face might help. She picked up the phone and called her friend, Charla Nash. Charla was kind, gentle. She'd known Travis since he was small. Maybe hearing her voice would help him calm down. Sandra asked if she could come by and help coax Travis back inside. It didn't sound like a big deal. Charla agreed. She pulled into the driveway just after lunch. In her hands, she carried something she knew Travis loved. His favorite Tickle Me Elmo doll, the one he used to carry around like a teddy bear. She got out of the car, smiled, and held it up like a peace offering. What happened next was chaos. Without warning, Travis charged. He moved fast, so fast that Charla didn't even have time to scream. The 200-pound chimpanzee leapt on her with the kind of explosive force no human could match. His hands, capable of unscrewing jars and holding paintbrushes, became weapons. He knocked her down in seconds, pinning her to the ground. Sandra ran outside and saw her best friend's body under Travis, blood already staining the snow. "Travis, stop! Get off her!" But he didn't stop. He tore into her face, ripping at skin, cartilage, and bone. Charla's eyelids were gone, her lips shredded. He bit at her hands, pulling off fingers, ripping away soft tissue. Her screams turned to gurgles. Sandra grabbed a shovel. She hit him, again and again. Then a knife. She stabbed him, over and over. Nothing worked. Desperate, she ran inside and called 911. Her voice on that call is still hard to listen to today. "He's eating her! Please, send someone! He's killing my friend!" The first officer on the scene was a young cop named Frank Chiafari. He had no idea what to expect. Maybe a domestic disturbance, maybe a wild animal loose. What he saw was a nightmare. Travis, covered in blood, opened the front door by himself like a human. His mouth was red, his chest heaving, and then he charged. The officer drew his gun and fired multiple times. Travis ran back into the house, bleeding, and collapsed near his cage. By the time backup arrived, Charla Nash was barely clinging to life. Paramedics couldn't even recognize her face. They said it looked like she'd been in a plane crash or a fire. She was airlifted to the hospital, where doctors immediately put her into a medically induced coma. Travis died in the house he grew up in, a house where he'd been loved, bathed, kissed goodnight, a house full of photo albums with him in Christmas pajamas. Now he lay dead, next to blood-soaked floors and overturned furniture, his favorite toys scattered like debris from a storm. Sandra stood outside, shaking, sobbing, staring at the front door. Her best friend was disfigured for life. Her son was gone. The dream was over. In the days that followed, America was stunned. Headlines screamed, "Pet Chimp mauls woman" and "Tragedy in Connecticut." Photos of Sandra and Travis flooded. The news, him smiling in sunglasses, her hugging him proudly. Now those images looked haunting. People asked, how could this happen? How did no one stop it? But the truth is, it had been coming. The signs were there. The warnings had been ignored. Love, it turns out, wasn't enough to stop what lived in Travis's DNA. He wasn't evil. He wasn't a monster. He was a chimpanzee. And that day, instinct won. The attack only lasted 12 minutes, but what happened in those 12 minutes changed lives forever. Charla Nash didn't die that day. Somehow, by some miracle, she survived. But her survival came with a cost most of us can't even begin to imagine. By the time she arrived at the trauma center in Cleveland, Ohio, her face was gone. Not scarred, not bruised, gone. She had no eyelids, no nose, no lips. Both hands had to be amputated. She was blind, permanently. Surgeons said it was one of the worst injuries they had ever seen from a non-lethal animal attack. She spent weeks in a medically induced coma. When she woke up, doctors had to explain to her what happened. She couldn't speak at first, only groan. Later, when she learned the full truth, her only words were, "I don't remember it, but I wish I didn't live through it." Meanwhile, Sandra Harold's world fell apart. She didn't face criminal charges. Authorities ruled it a tragic accident, but that didn't stop the guilt from eating her alive. She couldn't sleep. Couldn't look at photos of Travis. The home that had once felt warm and full of laughter now felt like a graveyard. The media hounded her. Critics labeled her selfish. Others called her naive. Some even accused her of criminal negligence. But the truth? She was just a woman who wanted to feel like a mother again. Less than a year later, in May of 2010, Sandra died of a ruptured aortic aneurysm. Her heart, literally and figuratively, gave out. Charla, against all odds, fought her way back. She underwent over 30 surgeries. including one of the first full-face transplants ever performed in the United States. She regained some ability to speak and even appeared on national television to raise awareness about exotic animal ownership. Sitting in the interview chair, her new face still healing, Charla said quietly, "I don't want anyone else to go through this. No one should have a chimpanzee in their home." After the attack, lawmakers moved quickly. Connecticut and other states passed stricter regulations on owning exotic animals. The federal government was pressured to act. Travis's story changed the law, but not in time to prevent the pain. Animal rights groups pointed to this case as proof. Wild animals don't belong in domestic spaces. No matter how much you love them, no matter how well you raise them, they are not pets. Still, some people defended Sandra. They said she loved Travis like a child, that she did her best, that her intentions were never selfish. And that's where this story gets uncomfortable, because maybe both things are true. Maybe Sandra loved Travis more than anything, and maybe loving him wasn't enough. Maybe Charla trusted her friend, and maybe trust wasn't enough. Maybe the idea that we can tame nature, that love can rewrite instinct, isn't just wrong, it's dangerous. So now we turn the question over to you. If you were in Sandra's shoes and you had lost your child, your husband, your entire family, and someone handed you a baby chimpanzee to raise, would you have done the same? If your best friend had told you, "Don't worry, he's like my son," would you have stepped out of that car? More importantly, do you believe love can change an animal's nature? Or are we projecting human emotions onto creatures that were never meant to live by our rules? Are we confusing love with control? At Animal Story, we don't tell these stories to place blame. We tell them because they matter, because they force us to look closer at the bonds we build with animals and the limits of those bonds. If this story moved you or made you think twice about the line between love and instinct, subscribe for more stories like this, because sometimes the stories that haunt us the most are the ones that began with nothing but good intentions.